So that's enough about me, enough about the Writer Center. I want to call up our moderator for the day. James Mathews is a retired Air Force Chief Master Sergeant and holds an MA in writing from the Johns Hopkins University. Last time I had to say that, I missed the first S, and it's mocked, so I made sure to enunciate the second S. I'm going to add S's throughout here for no reason. In addition to serving on the board of directors for 9 years here at the Writer Center, he has taken and taught fiction at the center since 1995. His fiction has appeared in numerous journals, including Painted Bride Quarterly, Northwest Review, Carolina Quarterly, the Wisconsin Review, the Florida Review, as well as anthologies including Best American Mystery Stories. His collection, Last Known Position, was awarded the Catherine Ann Porter Prize for short fiction and was published by the University of North Texas Press in 2008. You can find him at jamesmatthewsonline.com. And James, please come up.
Thank you, Zach. So my job as moderator is to kick things off and to moderate. I'm going to do that with a bit of a preamble. Then I'm going to get the panelists all warmed up with some questions. And then I'll open things up for the audience. And then we'll wrap it up with refreshments and chit-chat. Sound good? All right. So before I do all that, I do want to thank the Writers Center for hosting the event. I see several familiar faces, and I did a walk around, and it was like Thomas Wolfe said, you can go home again. Isn't that what he said? Yeah? Probably not the venue for this quote. But I also want to thank each of you, certainly, for being here to see us and to hear us kind of on about writing groups. The small pockets of writers, you know what I'm talking about, mysteriously huddled together, cafes, living rooms, classrooms, one end of the country to the other, sharing their work, improving their craft, right? Supporting one another's goals, and undoubtedly enhancing the literary output of the nation. Writers Room, right? Speaking of which, I do want to extend sincere thanks to the panel, okay, my fellow writing group pals for taking the time to be here and talk about their experiences. So, from left to right, I'm going to give you the high-level highlights, and of course their full bios in the program. Carmelina Blogg is originally from Texas and has lived and worked in the Washington, D.C. area for over 30 years. Her debut short story collection, Geographies, was published last year. Jim Beam is a native Washingtonian who is also a participant and a workshop instructor here at the Writer Center. In addition to many published stories, his debut novel, The Deadening, will be published on November 3rd. Dana Kahn, I'm going down the list here, so I'm going to skip a few. He was born in California, grew up in Bethesda and Rockville, and he's the author of the novel Ghosts of Bergen County, which was published in 2015. He also teaches here at the Writer Center. To his right is Christina Kovac. She is a novelist and editor, former television journalist. Her debut novel, The Cutaway, was published in 2017. I might also mention that she's also a student at one of my workshops. She was the star. And she also is currently working on her second novel, which is called Watch Us Fall. Do we have a release window? Simon Schuster is finding out. And then finally, Kathleen Wheaton, who is in the center there. She grew up in California and has worked as a journalist for most of her career, which includes 25 years abroad in Europe, Central South America, and here in Bethesda. Her collection, Aliens and Other Stories, was published in 2013. She has a second forthcoming collection. Do you have a title for that now?
Yes. Beautiful Bob's House Museum.
Awesome. Okay. Heard it here first, right? She recently found out, and she let us know too, that she's returning to California soon as the 2024-2026 Wallace Stegner Fellow, which is a big deal. One thing to remember about our group here that I think is important is we were all just coming into our fiction writing careers when we came together some 25 years ago. And when you think about writing groups, which come in various shapes, sizes, for sure, I'm always struck by the paradox of the writing group. because fiction writing is such a solitary art form, right? It's you, it's your imagination, it's the keyboard, right? Or even not even the keyboard. So when James Thurber was dragged to cocktail parties by his wife, he would sit in the corner, put on his Coke bottle, where he had his Coke bottle with glasses on, a couple drags of the cigarette, and he would just observe people. And when somebody mentioned to his wife, "Why is your husband over there sulking in the corner?" she responded, "No, he's not sulking. He's writing." Again, if you're a writer, you know what I'm talking about. When we speak specifically, though, about critique writing groups, I'm also reminded of one of my favorite writers, who was mentioned earlier, Flannery O'Connor, and her time at Iowa, where she was savaged by her fellow writers every time she turned it. And they told her, "You can't write a story like that. Oh my God, you can't end the story that way. What, are you crazy?" Somewhat mousy, somewhat strong, she would sit in the corner and just take it. And then she went out and published everything she ever wrote, with the patented Flannery O'Connor ending. Now, she is in an exalted category. I'm not going to entertain any opinion to the contrary. But it turns out there are plenty of reasons, I think, to come together for a gathering of writers, including connecting with your fellow scribe community, improving their craft, improving your craft, getting and giving feedback, always important, and finally celebrating successes. Everything that I believe this writing group did successfully, in my opinion. We made it work, I think, because it took dedication, commitment, yes, and a lot of solitary hours spent alone, toiling on that dress, getting it into shape for the group. So we started here again at the Writers Center, it was 25 years ago. There were a few of us that were taking a workshop by Robbie Murphy at the time. If anyone remembers her, she was a great instructor here. I'm told that she's probably no longer teaching here. But one of the participants was Dolores Martin, and she phoned a group of us after the workshop and invited us to create an informal critique group. That's how it all happened. We'd come together once a month, share our stories, share our critiques, and go from there. Now, sadly, Dolores passed away a few years into our fellowship. But there have been several writers that have kind of come and gone, and one of them is Madeline Rosenberg, who's here today, fantastic writer. And your Don Kathy Bell, who can't be here today, she's in Australia. But we technically still consider them part of our little group, for sure. So more or less, I think we started with 25 years ago, I'm thinking about it. Very few small press publications amongst us, and now hundreds of published stories, at least one published book for each of us, and awards galore. So how did we do this? Well, in preparing for this panel, I took a stroll over to the University of Google, okay, to see what everyone else was doing. And the constant refrain that I kept saying was, when you're forming a group, you got to make sure you share or rotate the hosting and organizing duties. As soon as I read that, I thought, oops. Yeah, we didn't do that. We didn't do that because Carmelina Blog graciously has hosted us for the last 20 plus years. And has done a great job of doing it. Thank you, Carmelina. So I'm going to actually throw the first question out to her. I want her to talk a little bit about the process of our group's, sausage making. And share her thoughts, format, frequency, size of the writing group, what works best. And then I'll just kind of roll down the line here and get others' thoughts on it. This is the part I want to know. Carmelina?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, good. I found out about this group shortly after I graduated from the Johns Hopkins University. I was in classes with Dana, and he was actually a part of the group and had called me when they had an opening. They wanted one more writer, and he invited me to join. So I joined the meetings at Dolores's house and discovered this cadre of other writers, and I thought, wow, this is good. And we met with Dolores at her house for about a year or a year and a half, I recall. And unfortunately, she became ill and passed away. And we felt that loss keenly. She was a terrific writer and a wonderful hostess. So I decided, well, I'm sort of in the area, we'll use my house. Let's just continue our meetings, and I'll be happy to do the hosting. And we decided to kind of stick with the format that I think the group was using originally, which was to have monthly meetings. And at each meeting, we would select 2 writers to submit either a short story, or if they were working on a novel, a chapter or 2 from what they were working on. And they would do it ahead enough in time that we could read it and work up a critique of for discussion purposes. And everyone would gather at my house, and I'd put out some lemonade that was store-bought, not too good, not too cold. Don't want everybody hanging around forever. And some peanuts. And we start hashing through the stories. And our approach was to kind of roughly use the kind of typical workshopping approach that we were used to as students at Hopkins and other kinds of writing programs, and I think also similarly to what they do here at the Writers Center, actually. So the focus really stayed on the work, and people would share their comments, and it was the kind of thing where everyone would take a turn, offering their comments about a short story or what part of the novel someone else was working on. And then the writer would speak and maybe provide some of his or her point of view about, what they were trying to do with the story or what their intentions were or what have you. And so that's how it worked. And I was your official cat herder because, let's face it, that's what it's like trying to get writers all on the same page. So as someone who runs a little group like this, I guess it's key to remember to keep a daily planner with you. And at the end of every meeting, we would set the date for the next meeting, and that usually took almost as long as the meeting itself to get everybody to agree on a date. And then we picked two more writers to submit manuscripts and send them around to the group, and everyone would again, work up their comments. And usually we could do this by email. People could email their manuscripts. Or sometimes I think early on people did actually bring a physical manuscript with them, and they would bring enough copies for people, to have. It's either way, it's fine. It's whatever people agree on. And then we not only shared our comments, but we would also type them up and hand them, back with our, with the marked up copies of the manuscripts or whatever, because I think that's always helpful to have the written comments as well when you're taking all of this back to your desk as a writer and you're digesting some of this stuff. And I know for me, my approach would be to gather the comments, hang on to them, but I always liked to put things away and maybe come back to them a few days later when I've had time to sort of think about the stories more. And I feel like the way that we talked about the work and kept our focus on the work is really what, for me, helped me the most. And I do feel that it helped us all in not only identifying problem areas in the work itself, but in having that opportunity to really hear the response of others to your work, because as Jim noted, writing is a very solitary act, and to have that opportunity to share your work with other writers, and these are folks that over time I really learned to trust, and having that is a really valuable thing to have, and I'm really grateful for it. So. And I think it helps you grow as a writer too. So I don't know, I'm probably babbling on, but I think think that's
Excellent. Yeah, and I just want to, again, move on down the line here. And Jim, just your impressions, your experience with the workshop, with the group. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think out of everyone that was with us, I was the only one working construction at the time, so, and I had done that my whole life. That was my money job. So this was a great opportunity for me. I had been writer center recommended me by a friend of mine, and my first workshop was with Robbie and some of these folks, actually a couple of these folks. And as Jim said, Dolores was in that particular workshop. It was a big workshop. So their format was what we used. We copied the format of that workshop at Dolores' house. She set the rules. She set the cookies out and told us basically this is what she wanted, she thought we should do. She picked 3 men and 3 women out of, I don't know how many people were there, but in that workshop, probably close to 30, I think, something like that. And just pretty much asked if you wanted to do it. I think everyone she called said yes. Because I think we were all...
That's what she told us. We were probably the last one.
But anyway, I just said that the idea behind joining the workshop for me was that I really was a novice. I had had 1 story published at that point. I was very excited about that, very proud of it, but it was a really small magazine and it was local and it was an experience. But then once we started getting into the workshop, not the workshop, the group, the writing group, and meeting once a month, it created a regularity for me, which I needed. Raising children, having a family, working construction, getting up early every day, and a lot of times working on Sundays. You needed something to kind of keep you on track. And I always looked at it like a B-side, have an A-side and 45, whoever remembers 45s, but they had a B-side. The B-side was always maybe not as important as the A-side, but it was there, and you could play it just as loud, do it just as clearly, understand it just as well. And so I always felt like that was part of my life that maybe I wasn't developing, and this was an opportunity, and it really worked out well for me. So.
I just want to add quickly, he makes a good point. We all had our day jobs, we have all the families to raise, and it really was, I think it's a testament to our commitment and our perseverance and our persistence to keep this group going. Because it wasn't easy with so much to
Even in
do.
the COVID era, right? We were on Zoom for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say for some of the years that we were together, Jim was actually deployed in Iraq. So we had a real variety of people and life experiences, which I think was also very valuable. But our commitment was to getting these stories ready when it was our turn. And at the same time, I had monthly deadlines. I was a magazine writer. And I felt like my fiction commitment was even more important. I just couldn't imagine missing that deadline because what was I going to say to these other people if I didn't have my story ready? So I just felt that even more than my money job, this was something that I absolutely had to do. And that sense of responsibility, not only to your craft, but to your fellow writers and valuing their time as critics, I think that was really important too.
So I'm the last one that came on. I don't remember when I came, so it was sometime during the Obama administration, and I just remember that these two were so little that they were in car seats. And my husband, Joe, who worked on Nebraska Avenue, would meet me in front of Carmelinda's house, and we'd move the kids over, and I'd move the kids from my car into his car, and he'd take the kids home, and I'd go into the writers group, and it was just such a wild time. Just trying to get it all together. I came to the group was kind of kismet, I think. My sister-in-law had knew Jim and told me to read a book by Jim, so I bought this book, Last Known Position, and I was like, wow, this is like a really great book. And she said, you know, he teaches at the Writers Center. And I said, what is the Writers Center? I didn't know what that was. Because I've been talking to her, you know, I have this sort of idea for a novel. I've been thinking, you know, this journalism thing really isn't working out for me, and how hard can novel writing be? Which is hilarious. Anyway, so I read Jim's book. I saw that he taught a class. It was called Building a Page Turner. Is that what it was? Building a Page Turner? Or it's something about
I think
a
that's
page
what it was,
turner.
yeah.
It's something like that. And I was like, I'd like to go to Page Turner.
Yeah.
So I took the class and I read my first chapter through of what would later become The Cutaway. And it was so great and totally trashed it because it was absolute garbage, you know, but then I took the class again and it was a little bit better and I was learning things, and then I think I might have taken your class 3 times. I might have been like a stalker.
Peter Finger.
So, and then eventually I had this, you know, kind of first draft, and Jim said to me, would you, one of our writers has unfortunately left our group, but we have a spot open. And I was like, wow, I mean, okay, but I'm not like really a writer, even though I've written this novel, which is like insane to think that you can write a novel and think that you're not a writer. It's just such a weird head game, this writing thing. And he told me they were all literary fiction writers, and I was like, I need help with character. This is great. And so I came.
So, real quick, just to go back to the beginning and Dolores, I did want to mention that, you know, some of you all might be thinking about how I put a group together, and I would say that Dolores really put this group together, and she was super, super persistent in getting the original group together. I mean, I remember it happening over maybe 6-7 weeks, you know, constant emails like, let's do this, are we going to do this? And we finally did it, and all that. The other thing I wanted to say was that, and I teach here also, I always tell my students, you become a better writer doing 2 things. One is reading and one is writing. And in a writing group, in a workshop, you do both those things a lot. And for me, I got, I would say, more out of critiquing these guys' work than I get out of receiving the critiques that they give me, because I feel like just the process of doing the critiques is very valuable for me. I can see more of my work through that process as well.
Let me stay there with you, Dana. Let me ask you this, and I want to ask everyone this. Now, you've all been kind of through workshop experience, obviously, and also MFA experience as well, where they do the workshops. What do you think about this group being the same or different than those other experiences that you've had? And how does an individual writer use the writers group to actually, you know, as one component to developing your own craft and becoming better, and again, with an eye toward publication or whatever your personal goals may be?
Well, I think the difference between the writing group and taking a class, obviously, is there's no teacher in the writing group. I mean, we're peers. We're all equals. In a class, in a workshop, for better or for worse, there's somebody leading it. And, you know, that's a big difference. And the personality of that instructor has a lot of bearing on how successful the workshop is. You know, what was great about this group is obviously there is no workshop leader, but the chemistry somehow worked for a long, long time. And, you know, we are still great friends. We're still great friends who, you know, can joke around about our work. But, you know, it wasn't like when we got into the workshop, we were talking about, you know, a lot of other things other than work. So, I think that's the biggest difference. But, because we grew up together, for lack of a better word, we were, I feel like the chemistry was there because in terms of our commitment and in terms of, our persistence in the craft, we were all on the same page.
Did you know I don't have an MFA? It's not.
I didn't know. You should though. You should. Let's just all pretend for a minute.
Maybe I was being a little creative, maybe coming in. No, I don't have an MFA. I took a ton of workshops around the Writer Center. I would just say 100% what you're talking about with the editing. You're not a writer until you know how to edit. You just aren't. I mean, there's no writer who isn't first a great editor. And the hardest thing in the world is to edit yourself. It's so much easier to learn to edit on other people's feelings than your own. You learn how to, this group was like really great for me when I had to learn how to deal with editors later. I learned how to talk to them. I learned how to accept their critique. They are much rougher than you guys, by the way. Which you guys all know since you all have editors. But you just sort of learn how to look for the really important things. And I don't think I would have gotten that in a workshop because I don't think I trusted everyone and loved everyone and felt vulnerable enough in a workshop like I did with you guys.
We did really, although we were not social friends and we spent maybe sometimes a few minutes talking about different things that were going on in our lives, but we really did focus on our stories. And I think through that experience, we grew to know each other in a very kind of profound way. But I think that we were also lucky because this editing process takes this kind of surgical balance of kindness and honesty. And I think that this group really exhibited both qualities because you always remember that there's a person behind this story and this person wants to improve their writing. And so you need to do both things. You need to think about how they feel, but also you want them to write the best story possible. And I just think we had an amazing quality in every single member that they were able to keep that in mind. So we didn't have, and I've heard about this, people having big blowouts and blow-ups and fights, and we never, sometimes we fought over the last cookie.
Spirited.
I wouldn't let them take over the whiskey can.
Yes.
Rule number 1.
Yeah.
As Christine said, I don't have an MFA either. So the idea of, to reiterate what Dana said, of reading and editing was like foreign territory for me because I was working all the time. And when I wasn't working construction, I was trying to write at night and early in the mornings and on the weekends. So this opportunity was, for me, truly a learning experience. So in that regard, it was kind of like a workshop for me, but it did not have the nature of a workshop. Dana mentioned that, it depends on your workshop leader. I've led workshops at the Writer Center, but it depends on the chemistry and the karma of the people in the workshop and where they're at and what they are looking for from this, and from their experience in a workshop. I think for us, we were all looking for exactly the same thing. When we came to this writing group, every one of us, I believe, was looking to improve our writing and become real writers. I wasn't willing to even call myself a writer at that period of time when I joined the group. Because I didn't believe in myself, but through my, interactions with these folks, I came to feel that I was an equal of theirs, regardless of what you really feel in your head and what you have on the wall. It's how they make you feel. And the critique, although they weren't always exactly what you wanted to hear. I would take, if you have 7 people in the group, or you have 6 people in the group, if everybody said the same thing about one thing, see you later. If everybody agreed that this was a particularly strong point, we'll keep that and we'll move from there. But that's kind of, I think, in parts how I learned how to edit for my own work, which is what we're doing now. I mean, we have readers, people have beta readers, and I have beta readers, but nothing like a group. So,
And I think the mechanics of it was we would actually have everyone go around the room, obviously, except for the writer. The writer would stay quiet, and they would hear the opinion from everyone about their work. And then there would be a little discussion at the end amongst them, the writer's still silent, so they can hear, because there was disagreement about some of the approaches. In fact, I can remember many times I would say something along the lines of, I had recommended you change it this way, but after hearing Christina, I think you should go with her approach. That would be a better way to do this. And then again, if they take the advice, yes, no. It's all good.
Yeah, I would just add that we were typically 6, 7 people. And the number of people in a group is also important, I think, because you want to have enough time to meet and talk about the work that you're looking at. And you don't want 10, 12, 15 people, I think, because otherwise you're just not going to have, it's not going to work as well. And I really feel like the number we kind of ended up with, it was almost like rolling the dice, but we ended up with 7 members. Sometimes we were 6 during an evening, sometimes someone couldn't make it. And my rule of thumb was if we can't have a quorum of at least maybe 4 or 5, then we would try to reschedule the meeting. The number of people that you have at any given time for discussion of work is, I think, something to keep in mind, because it does help, and it helps in terms of giving everyone ample time to share their comments and talk about the work. And I also wanted to add, I think, kind of jump on something Kathleen was talking about, that we weren't really that social as a group. We'd spend a few minutes before we start talking about the work. We'd spend a few minutes as people were coming in, and we'd chat and laugh and talk about what we were doing and stuff. But I don't know, I feel like I really got to know these guys through reading their work, and that was such an interesting experience to really come to know someone through the stories they were telling, the chapters they were giving, they were trusting me with, and that I was doing the same with my own work. And as others have mentioned, I think that's where the chemistry grew with us, and I really feel like all of us really cared so much about reading and writing, and this was the thing we loved most, and this was what we were doing, and I don't know, it was good.
So one thing I just wanted to add, when we did, get together, we would chit chat a little. But one thing we always did was there any news? And if anybody had gotten a piece accepted, or a story came out in a literary journal, people would generally bring the journal, or if it's online, send the link around. And I think we're very good about celebrating our successes, and that was an important component of it, because that's why we're doing it.
I mean, readings, book launches, we've all been to those for each other and supported each other. I mean, I just wanted to add just something on the number too. Having that odd number was really important too, because again, you're critiquing 2 stories every month, and you don't want to always be against this it's not competition. You don't want to be against the same person. I mean, I dread having to go against Jim here, my favorite customer. But no, I think that helped out, because you were really getting, I guess, about 2 or 3, maybe even 4 stories or chapters read, and sometimes it was longer than that. I think we tried to keep it at about 30 pages.
Yeah, 30 pages.
Yeah, that's right. Using the chapter part of this.
Do you know what was the most important thing, Jim, was that we always started every critique with what is working
Yeah.
in the work.
Sure.
And that's so important for young writers especially. You have to know what's working, because if you're always focusing on what's bad or what's not bad, but what isn't quite there yet, you lose the whole baby. Don't throw out the baby. You know, you can walk away from some workshops where you feel like, God, I'm the worst writer in the world. What the actual hell? I have to go back to my day job. You know, but this group would always point out, okay, you know, climb off the roof, Christina. This is working, the big things. As long as the big things are working, everything else can be fixed. And you guys are so good about focusing first on the positive and then going in on the critiques.
There's a very, I think it's a distinction for understanding the difference between critique and criticism. And, you know, you have to, I know when I was doing workshops and leading workshops, I used to hand out this little handout at the beginning of each workshop that would suggest how you would critique something as opposed to just criticizing. Criticism is okay, but it's kind of a negative energy, whereas a critique is not. A critique is an avenue to improve the work. And if you have thick enough skin, in our case, you can really improve the work by listening to your fellow writers, point out your shortcomings and whatever they are in terms of the writing, not personal shortcomings.
And I think we were pretty much mixed as far as male, female in the group.
I think that was
Which was very helpful, because I know somebody pointed out that if they read another male author describing a female character putting eyeliner on the eyebrows, they were going to be great. So we were able to get some good feedback. Now the genres, we were all literary fiction writers.
Short story writer.
So,
at the time.
yeah. So how did that work?
I think that
You came in as a novelist.
I can as a novelist. I think you guys really intimidated me with your literariness. Same word. Literariness. with the yeah. I think you guys are more literary.
We don't have an MFA, so we can say that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
Who
think
knows? Yeah.
I think that's true.
We talked about Proust a lot.
You guys
Forget comfort zones.
yeah.
Well, I know one of the criticisms for a writing group that goes on, they say too long, is that the writers begin to write, I know in workshops they begin to write for the instructor, right? Or their writing starts to become similar to one another's. I don't think that ever happened with us, and that's just my opinion, and I think you guys would probably agree with me, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's another piece that's important, and this goes for a workshop or a writing group, is to consider, start with what the writer is intending for the work to be. Christina's novel is, her published novel is crime fiction. And so, you know, it's supposed to be a page turner. And, you know, I think it's important to start from that perspective because that is her intention. And as a reader, it's important to do that. The other thing I wanted to say, if there is one shortcoming for a writer's group, I think it is workshopping novels. It's not like a short story. So, you know, I remember one summer we did Kathy Bell's entire novel, and that was a good way to do it, I think.
Right.
You know,
Because it's pretty steady in terms of the content we were getting.
Right. But that is a tricky thing, short stories versus novels in a writing group.
I think we also tried to, whenever you turn in a chapter, you know, subsequent to another chapter, you would always have to give a little, you know, preamble or something
Right.
to say what happened before, just to get everybody to kind of react.
Especially if you
It might be
change
months since, yeah, exactly.
You know, because you just changed everything because of last critique.
Right.
So, hey, you guys, you know, I scrapped that. Or the most heartbreaking thing is when you work through 3 chapters that you absolutely love, and then and you go to, you know, the editor finally, then they cut it because it doesn't actually fit as tightly within the novel. I mean, within a, you know, a novel's arc, all that matters is the entire story. It doesn't matter, it's 1 chapter, 2 chapter, 3 chapters. If 1 chapter, 2 chapter, 3 chapters, you know, sort of meanders off the ranch or infects the arc in any way or does something that just doesn't work, I mean, it's gotta go. And I'm like, but Jim Mathews wrote the chapter, you know, and you do that. See ya.
I think it was, I mean, and that's not to say that we kid-gloved it either. I mean, again, I think we were talking honestly. We were honest. We all trusted one another. So we got some really good feedback. I mean, the key, I think, in any workshop, really, or any critique situation, is you focus on the work. You don't focus on the writer, right? Because the work is going to be, you know, the characters that you were writing about or describing are not you. But sometimes that can happen. I've been in workshops where people say, now you say you're doing this, and no, the writer's not saying that, the character is doing that. So let's stick to the work itself. I think that was really important.
Good distinction.
I want to make sure I get some audience folks in, so if you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll direct you if it's a general question or it's one specific for an author. Let me know. Yes, so Matt.
How do you find people to form a group, or how do you join a group?
So in my workshops that I run here, I always tell people about my group, and I encourage them to, you know, to think about who in the workshop they felt like was giving them the critiques that were most useful, and who are writing the kind of fiction that they, you know, like to read, and they feel like they can help. So I think that's one, you know, place to go. Another place to go is you've got, you know, dozens of people here, and we're going to have a little, you know, chit chat at the end. And I don't know if anybody knows each other, but I imagine that you'd find interested parties here.
Others? Yes.
Well, you know, I'm a member of a writing group and I like and appreciate it. But one of my friends, New Yorker writer, Pushcart, Irish American, extraordinary writer, she detests that socialization process. It homogenizes, it lowers the ability. So can you speak about some of the, I'll call it the negatives of a workshop, or the things you want to, you know, how do you avoid what concerns her, for example?
One thing I think that you might think it would be a negative, that if you're with each other for a long period of time, same people, that either you begin to copy those other people, or you just get complacent about the work in general, or, you know, the length of time makes you too familiar with everybody else's work.
Yeah.
In our case, I think that the fact that we weren't social outside, but we really stayed focused on the work. And as Dana said earlier, about how, you know, you recognize what the intention is of the work and you stick with it. You're not trying to push somebody to be something different, to be the writer that you want them to be. You want them to be the writer they want to be. And so in that regard, you know, you're encouraging them to maintain their style, maintain their, you know, their methods, their whatever. You know, you're just looking to kind of help them, you know, like get over some bad spots, you know, and they're not giving you the work. In our case, I don't think anybody submitted work that they thought was at that point ready to go. They're submitting it for a reason, you know, to the group. And the reason is to get it ready to go. You know, so there were times when...
But not so once they're done that it wasn't a draft either, right?
Right.
It was always, yeah, I mean, you would always put something together that was complete from beginning to end.
Correct. When we submitted it, that's true. And it was a finished story. And it was not a rough copy. Nobody was doing rough work. Everybody was like holding out and trying to submit something that's, you know, worthwhile everybody else's attention. But I think as far as negatives go, that would be the biggest fear, would be becoming too easy on each other and too much alike. And nothing is further from the truth in this group, frankly. I mean, the writing styles are so different, so, we just kept that.
Yeah, I would say too, just maybe I had, I did have sometimes a distorted idea, because I'd finish a story and I'd think, oh, this is the best thing I've ever written in my whole life, and then I get 7 different ideas about how it could be better. And so I think that's, there are some writers who really don't like to show things until they submit them. But I was always, even though it was very deflating, I was always really glad to get that, and because it always made the writing better.
I would also say a writer, a happy writer, or maybe even a successful writer needs 2 things: voice and vision. And if you're not in a group of people who respect your own personal voice and your own personal vision, then you're in the wrong group. You have to somehow find people who, say, oh, okay, like, I don't even read crime fiction, but you know what? I'm going to give this thing a shot and really look at the work as it is. And I did the same thing too. I would always think, I'd actually read some of their work that wasn't, being presented to be workshops. Because, you really need to know the writers you're dealing with. You deal with the writers you're dealing with. And you hope that they'll respect your vision and voice.
There's another thing that I think helped keep it kind of flowing in a good way was every now and then, this is something we did in the kind of latter half of we didn't do it early on in the group, but we kind of jazzed things up a little by having these exercises where we would take, say for example, the month of October. So we're going to meet in October, it's the month of Halloween, right? So we would all do kind of a horror story for 1,000 words. We turn it in right before, and we come together and we talk about that. Or in February, you've got Valentine's Day, and we would, I'm looking at my wife when I say that, check, box check. And we do like a kind of a, almost an exercise where we'd say, okay, 1,000 words, you've got 2 characters, okay? They got to be in a bar. And, again, you got 1,000 words, it's got to be a romance. It's got to be something that kind of connects up with the month itself. So that kind of helped, I think. I don't think we all turn in everything all the time. I think usually maybe half of us, or a little more than that. But and that was kind of fun. It kind of, again, jazzed things up a little bit. Kept it fresh. Yes?
Yeah, so on that note, I don't recall your name, you saying about sharing your crime novel with people that maybe don't normally read crime novels. And I was in a Writers Center class where we were all doing personal essays, and we were kind of too far away, so most of what we do share is usually by email, and it's very informal. It's not really quite a writers group. There's just about 4 of us that do it out of the whole class. But what I was trying to say is that maybe it's better to have people who write different kinds of things in the writers group instead of everybody taking this personal essay class, and so guess what we're all writing?
Right.
So that's what I wanted to find out. Is it probably more productive if people write different genres?
But I would say too that I see that a lot in my workshops where we've got somebody writing, memoir, and another person writing a nonfiction, creative nonfiction, and somebody else with fiction. As long as you stick to the fundamentals, which we all kind of really connected with, it doesn't really matter what the genre is. Does the story move?
Right.
Are the characters rounded? Are they flat? Those types of basic questions. That's what we're really focused on, rather than just the specifics of the genre itself.
I took some of what I was going to say. I think that we actually did have a couple of members who came and went who were writing a little bit different. I think we had one member at one time, she was with us shortly, who did a bit of nonfiction. And I never had a problem with looking at nonfiction or something memoirish or something like that, because it was always about the writing. And as long as I felt like I could understand what that writer's goals were and intentions, then for me it was another opportunity to focus on writing and the quality of it. And I don't see these, genre is a word that bookstores use a lot and sellers use and classifiers. But for writers, it can be so self-limiting, and I think that the skills that you have as a writer, for any of us, I think we feel like we can bring it not only to fiction, but to other things. And I think it's all about the writing.
I would just echo, sorry,
Go ahead.
the notion of genre, and I get we're talking genre, maybe memoir versus fiction, but within fiction, there can be these different genres which are a construct of the publishing industry. And so I think that's important to recognize because they are trying to label things so you can sell them. We're not trying to do that. We are trying to make the work as good as possible.
Yes.
So I might have missed when you were talking about format. Is it correct to say that when you were critiquing in a month, you were not also an author on the stand? Is that correct?
You were also an author on.
Well, so here, when I've been in a writing group,
Sure.
I found that I critiqued and edited to my own detriment. We were all writing something every month.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get so caught up in really taking seriously the work of my fellow writers that, my writing would get short shrift.
Mm.
And it's actually how I became an editor. Because I found that and people started asking me out of the group. But I realized, I think I would be better in a format where I know that my job this month is to read others' works. Now next month, I'm not going to read anybody's work, or maybe I'll,
Right.
How did you balance that? Maybe it wasn't difficult for you all?
Again, we did have the two submissions per month. So you were always going to be reading at least one submission. But back to what Dana was saying earlier too, that the reading part, the critiquing part, it just got my critiquing ability got so much better by really doing the
Okay, so
quality work.
two per month.
Mm-hmm.
But you're talking about scheduling yourself, right? Like how am I a writer, how am I editing?
Yeah.
Right? So for me, and I don't know if this worked for you, but I have my writing time and that's sacred, right? And that's like that's the most important thing because without that, then I'm not here, obnoxious or whatever, but that's like the 4 hours of my day, first thing. And when my kids were little, I would remember the little headphones that I would put on. I said, don't come on, these headphones on. So that's like, I know it's terrible. But, so that's like the first 4 hours. And then at night or something, you just need a break because you're using two totally separate sides of your brain. I mean, the editing thing is creative in a way, but it's not yours. You can't go in there. It's not, but the writer part of you, that needs to be. If you want to be a writer, I sort of feel strongly you need to do it every day. Time to yourself, whether it's an hour, half an hour, sitting in the car waiting for your kids at the bus stop, whatever that is, And then the editing, it's not that I gave you guys short shift, but you got the night brain. I was like, the back spring. So, yeah.
But it sounds like you were doing a lot of people's work every month.
Yeah, I think our group actually was meeting weekly.
Oh.
So it was a lot. And I really wanted to show up, having honored their own work, and it wasn't paying as much.
You need those stretches of time
Yeah.
to really be able to keep doing your own work as well as reading the work of others. And
Thank you. It's very important.
And I can't tell you how many times I was reading a submission, and it's just like reading really good fiction, from somebody who's published a book, one of your favorite authors, and just getting all charged up and wanting to get back to that keyboard right away. It just made me a better writer, made me a motivated writer. I stole a few lines here and there. I'll not get into that. Others? Yes.
Is being in a writer's group a motivator for varying the type of story you tell? And if she writes crime fiction, I assume each one of you started off with some sort of genre. But does the writers group encourage moving into other types of fiction? Or do you pretty much stick with
I
it?
think it can. It depends on how much you write. For me, I mean, I think the more I'm a short story writer, the more short stories I write, the more I get tired of the way I did the last one, maybe. Or, you know,
Or the subject matter?
it could be the subject matter, it could be the style, the way that I'm writing it, but you're always searching for another way to maybe do something, because as a writer, you work through these things, and every story is a new challenge. So, I mean, I would say that as a story writer, and others can certainly respond otherwise, but I think it depends on how much writing you do, and I think the amount of writing you do, you reach this threshold with yourself in terms of, I want to try something different. I want to see what else I can do. And it's a way to break through, I think. And I think being in a group, that can help that along a lot.
Sure.
I mean, you started off, right, Christina, I remember in class, your novel was more literary than it was thriller at first.
I mean,
And then it evolved into thriller.
I think I started more heavy with character.
Yeah.
And then I decided to change the first three chapters into more shorter, action-y kind of thing. But, I mean, I don't think I ever gave up character.
And I'm one that just doesn't believe in character-driven versus plot-driven. I think a good story is a good story.
But you move around a lot.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's like what I read, you know, on my own, along with what I'm reading, you know, in the writers group, or, you know, I read for a literary magazine, and whatever I'm reading influences my writing. And that's why I always say, read a lot and write a lot.
I just wondered if it was like Picasso going through a blue period and a Cubist period.
We're not Picasso.
I don't know about Picasso, but I know that when I started writing, my writing has changed and evolved dramatically, if that's what you're talking about, since I've been in this group. I mean, pretty vivid memory when I first started, and I would say it was relatively focused on crime fiction because that's what I was reading. You know, I mean, that's what I read at night, and it's for pleasure, so that's what I was writing. And I think I like the thing that I've kind of moved
Well,
on.
your style, even on your own, Jim, was a lot like Cormac McCarthy, I thought. And it hasn't changed at all. And he was kind of really hot then when we first started in the form. He's still pretty well.
Now he's there.
Where was that?
He's still hot. He's still hot. He's not like anymore. Okay, well, let me make sure that we have time for the chit chat and the refreshments. I do want to ask, again, go down the line here and ask the panelists if they'll just offer up some advice. Again, I think we touched on it a little bit, but what do you do if you've got a writer or you're a group of writers that want to start something like this? What are some of the steps, or what are the things that they should consider?
I would just say, you know, be persistent with the group that you want to work with the people you want to work with, and sell it. You know, if you want to do this, you're going to have to sell it to them, because I was skeptical when I was first approached about this group, and I didn't know, you know, what I was doing. I was being foolish.
You're a good leader.
Yeah,
I have no place to go. Good lemonade.
Look for people who write every day, who care about the craft as you do, no matter what genre, no matter what. You know, look for people who care about characters, who care about people, and who are really interested in what makes people tick. They'll be the best.
And take it seriously. You know, this is like taking on a job. And you really want to rise to the occasion.
And if it's not working, it doesn't feel right, just walk away. There's no problem.
Yeah, you'll know when you've got the chemistry. And I know I would say develop some ground rules, but also have fun. And I think if you are lucky enough to get with the group, that you're with them and over, and then when you start, it's 1 year, then 2 years, then 3 years, and more. It starts to stay with you in a way that you come to know these people, and the bond is just there after a few years, and that's really what I think held us together.
Yeah, something.
Sure.
Don't incorporate lunch or dinner or training or anything. Just meat. Just meat, and have cookies and lemonade, and call it a night thought. And then review your critiques later. Like Carmelina said earlier, let it sit for a couple weeks, or a week, or whatever you can stand, then go back on it and review the critiques. And
Yeah, you need that time together, but you also need that distance in time, and,
I was in a lunch group.
Yeah.
Book
It's fun. Drinking groups. We didn't drink. Maybe, I guess we had champagne and.
we would get out the champagne.
And celebrate, to celebrate, but
Yes.
very abstemious.
Yes.
But it also helps you, I think, really grow that skin that all writers need, right?
Yeah.
Thick skin.
Exactly.
Because, you may hear 6 people say the same thing, get rid of these characters, get rid of this guy, that. But you often hear 6 different opinions. And you just gotta know how to discriminate and what you're gonna take, what you're not. Yeah.
So it's nice to get critiques back, but also I find very valuable hearing how other people see and view events in their lives.
Exactly,
Learning from
yes.
them, developing empathy, learning different voices. I mean, it's, this is what I see in my writers group, in my experience, the workshops at Hopkins and so forth. Just so insightful. And I'm older, but you're hearing from different generations, different perspectives.
It's a really valuable thing to have, yeah. It's because, as Kathleen mentioned, you get up from your desk and you think, wow, I just wrote a masterpiece. Well, guess what? But at the same time, you appreciate the intelligence of your readers, their sharpness, their ability to see things that you can't. Every writer has blind spots. And I have felt incredibly lucky to have so many really smart readers who have been able to share with me their impressions and their perspective on my stories. And it's just really helpful.
Right, my point is not just feedback on what you write, but how they tell and relate their own traumas to their writing or issues and topics and visions. It's a very rich place.
Yes.
How do you feel the feedback you get from your colleagues in the group compared to the criteria that editors are using to decide whether to publish a work?
Editors are trying to sell a book, generally speaking, or a piece of work or whatever it happens to be. We're not trying to sell anything, we're just trying to get better.
The focus is more on the selling, the marketing.
That's what I would say.
And editors are always looking for a reason to stop reading.
Yeah.
So, so you get to page 3 and there's a flat character in the middle, okay. But since we were reading to the end, we could see the potential maybe, and so we're kind of like, the firewall, but not the firewall, but what do you call it? First responders, whatever.
When you're dealing with an editor, you really want to go to your writer's group first. You don't want to give an editor anything that you don't think is absolutely rich, suspenseful, interesting, knock your socks off, because they'll read it once. And even if you're in my contract with them, they'll read it once, and you've only got one other time to fix it. There's not, this is where you, with your writer's group, is where you really learn to write, and where you really hone things. I was just reading something that Joe Ide, who wrote the Q, not, who I'm talking about, Joe Ide. Anyway, he said that his first book, that his debut novel that sold, he had rewritten it 27 times. No editor is going to read anything more than once. So he had, people that he let read, and that's where, for me personally, that's where these guys were, so great about, taking first, second, third, fourth, fifth drafts. And you don't ever get those from that.
But also also, you took it so seriously, I think, again, with that tough love at times,
Yeah.
that when I was writing and leading draft, I might decide, oh, I'm gonna leave this like this, but then I thought about it and said, no, I can't, that's lazy. They're never gonna let me get away with this. I've got to write so that it's right. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but at least it motivates me and charges me to really kind of do the best that I can do, which is really important. Because I think if you have just, kick love group, like you're just sharing with your mom or your significant other, then, you're probably going to be a little more lazy with your approach because you're going to get, hugs and kisses no matter what. But
I think I rewrote the cutaway at least 5 times. I think you've read it at least 5. And I think you were my first reader, and you were nice.
Because it was good.
Well, but it wasn't good enough, right? So it's just, that's what I'm saying, like.
I don't think I like the title, the first
You
title.
never.
So I think we're gonna wrap and get some refreshments, but also mingle, chit chat. And again, thank you to the panel, thank you to the Writer Center, and that's it.
Thank you.